Good morning. Welcome to the Coaches Portal. Got Ronnie Gatry over here beside us, brother. Good morning. And then also guest on the show today is Caleb Bagwell. And yeah, brother, thanks for being on the show this morning.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Before Caleb, you get going just on your lens and a little bit of your story, I just kind of wanted to share something more of just thankfulness for you. As right before we started this morning, you prayed, and that was really powerful because we don't know who all listens to the show, but just hoping that like this show meets you and that God can speak to you. He can speak to you through people. And so I just honestly right now give that to the Lord that this might touch somebody this morning and reach out to them. But yeah, brother, at the first of every show, I put everybody on a time limit, so I will cut you off. So you got about 5 minutes, and just kind of share a little bit about your story, man. Help us put on your lens just so that, others can, just know a little bit about you.
Yeah, man. Nick, you know me well enough now to know that putting me on a 5-minute time limit is gonna be really hard, but I'll try to rein it in. So I grew up in South Carolina and had an awesome family, awesome childhood. Grew up, mom and dad are still best friends. We hang out all the time. And so it was a really, really good experience. My grandfather was a pastor. My uncle was a pastor. My dad has a degree in Bible. And so like I was in and around the church pretty much all the time. I mean, if the doors were open, we were there doing something. And so I just had an awesome experience with that. I know some people don't, but I did. I mean, I saw genuineness in the male figures around me, and so just had a really good time growing up, and went through high school, college, met my wife Sarah in college, and so we ended up not meeting to our last year in college, but
that was at Clemson, right?
I wasn't going to say that, but
I thought I'd got to bring that out because we want to bring confrontation.
I got it
on this show, and so throw that out there. Keep
going. We were at Clemson, and we met last semester senior year, and that was total by divine design because had she met me before that, she probably wouldn't have been very interested in me. I was a little bit of a wild child going through those early years, and God really found me. Actually the summer after my sophomore year in college, and I had a roommate that had gone home and worked for a church that summer, and he came back and told me he couldn't be my roommate anymore. I said, why? And he said, well, because you'd be a bad influence on me. And I remember that like holy 2x4 punch in the face of like, when did I become the bad influence? And it was really a moment that God got a hold of me and said, hey son, straighten up. And so my life changed pretty dramatically then. And that was summer after my sophomore year. And so by second semester senior year, I met my wife, Sarah, and I fell in love instantly, and she did not. And so that took a little bit of convincing, but that's how I knew I was supposed to go into sales after that. And so I got her on board, and we started dating, and we did a long distance thing for about 18 months. And then I moved to Texas where she was in school. And we lived 4 years in Houston, Texas, and had a great time, lived downtown in a little bitty apartment, and it was nice, but it was teeny, and so we had a good time, and then we moved here to Birmingham in 2014 for her to continue her training, and so
that's awesome.
So that's what brought us here. But the one piece that I really wanted to share is just my it was August 24th, 2014. I had like a meet Jesus in the real kind of moment. I was in my bedroom and I was reading a book by David Platt called Follow Me, and it all hit like all at one time that I had grown up in an incredible environment, but where I had a relationship with the rules and not with Jesus. And so that was, coming to grips with that term that like, God was just sitting there saying, do you love me? And I'm like, of course, Lord, and he's like, no, seriously, like, look at this. Do you love me? And what I realized is that I had this super unhealthy relationship with rules. And if I obeyed, I did good, God would bless me. And if I didn't, he wasn't going to bless me. And it had nothing to do with Jesus and what he had done for me. And so that was 2014, and life kind of changed from that point. I remember texting Sarah and saying, I think we missed it. Wow. Like we've missed something. And so life's looked a little bit different after that, and it's been awesome.
So many thoughts jumped out to me as you were speaking this morning. I have a funny question, and then I have a more serious question. So which one do you want to go first with?
Let's do
Ronnie.
Let's go funny.
Okay. Funny first, okay. You thought I was coming to you. I was going to let Ronnie do that one. So So you say you're good at sales. Okay. So 30 seconds elevator of how did you get Sarah on board?
Yeah. So I can tell the story. It's real easy. It happened in her car. We were on this little highway in Clemson, and she was taking me back to my house to drop me off. I don't know why she was driving. Weird story. But she said, she looked me dead in the eyes. She goes, Caleb, she's like, I'm leaving next month. We don't know each other well enough to get married. I'm going to be gone. I'm going to be in school. It's going to be a miserable 4 years while she was in med school. She's like, it's going to be a miserable 4 years. She's like we can't do this long distance thing. And I said, you know what? You make a lot of good points, Sarah. Honestly, you do. But, med school is probably going to be one of the hardest journeys you've ever walked on. And do you really want to do that by yourself? I mean, would you not really want to have somebody in your corner that you could come home to, that cooks and cleans and make sure you have what you need to thrive and survive in the setting that God's taking you through? And she looked at me. She says, "I don't have a rebuttal for that." And so that was about 4 weeks. Good. 4 weeks later, she says, "All right, we'll do this long distance thing." And so that was it. And then I knew.
That's legit,
I knew at that point,
bro.
I was like, I'm pretty sure I got a shot at marrying this girl. And so that was it. So
dude.
It was a good time.
No, you are good. You are good. I'll stamp it. Me and Ronnie. Good sales.
Yeah.
So it's good, man. Yeah, this is like total off the cuff question. Everyone knows that I prepare people really heavily before our podcast, and when I say that, they're laughing at me because you get a text with little info. But my question this morning is, you said, and I grew up in an incredible family, and I had also just the rule following gene, still is in me. And now you have kids, right?
Yeah.
How many?
I have 3.
Yeah. What do you give people out there listening that do have kids that you can provide like this great environment, but at some point it seems like everyone has this wrestle with God. And he has you and he brings you back, but just, I don't know. I feel like as a parent, I'm like, no matter how good I do, it feels like my kids are going to push at some point.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any, if you thought about that much for even your kids down the road, or has that even been something? Or just
that's I've talked about that a lot. There's a guy in town named Brian Pitts, and he's a fatherhood coach. He's a solid dude, and he's coached me through some things, and just thinking about, especially my oldest is my son Charles, and as Charles grows up, I want him to have a relationship with Jesus, right? Like I want him to understand the importance of obedience and how that reflects respect to some extent. But man, I want him to know Jesus and use that as the barometer on how he makes decisions. And I think that was different for me. Like I knew the rules and I knew how I was supposed to react inside the lines. And I did really good at that because I'm another topic we could talk about another day is I'm a huge people pleaser to a fault. And so for me, it was, I just wanted to do whatever made everybody else around me happy. Yeah. And if that meant being good and obedient and following the rules, then that's what I was going to do. Wow. And so, Brian and I have talked about that a lot, about how that relationship with Jesus is up to Jesus, right? And Charles. And I need to foster that and show him examples of that. But in reality, at the end of the day, like I'm going to try to set the best example I can. I'm going to hold him accountable the way God has positioned me to do as a father. But at the end of the day, by the time he gets old enough to start making some of his own decisions, like my deepest prayer is that he's right with the Lord and that God can guide him through those moments. And so that's, I think for any parent, just understanding that we can't control the heart, that we can control the external variables, but we're not able to control the heart, that's God's domain. And then just praying for that consistently. I mean, petitioning daily that his heart belongs to the Lord is just something that weighs on me real heavy.
Man, it's good, bro. You use the word barometer, which I've heard you use before, and close mentors have used that word. Go into that just a little bit of what do you mean when you say like barometer? Yeah,
so I think, and that may be for any meteorologists out there, that may be the exact wrong tool that I'm describing. But what I mean is that I think we as a culture are kind of coasting through life without having like a set of core values that guide our decisions. Yeah. And so we're just not intentional is really the word. And so I really encourage people I work with and friends to like kind of identify like those core values, like having that, like this is how I'm going to use these things as a gauge when I have to make any decision. So like, does it violate one of these 4 core values? And so I think that when I say barometer, I say it's something to test any decision against. And if you don't have something there, then you're just kind of making it up in every decision, and that makes it a whole lot harder. So,
yeah, it's good, man. No, it's good. Cooking. Well, I mean, that kind of leads into just like something we ask like each person on the show is like if someone were to leave you, or even your sons, or someone were to come in contact with you, what would be those like 3 practical things of you give them?
yeah.
You can go one at a time. You can go through all 3. And then why, like why this word or why this phrase? So
yeah, that's interesting. So, so I don't know if I've got 3 exactly, but I'll just kind of spit some out and then we can go from there. But my, one of the things that I have been so blessed with in life is community. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter whether I was in South Carolina with my family, when I was in Clemson with buddies in college, when I moved to Houston and didn't know anybody at all, or moved back to Birmingham where I didn't know anybody at all. God has blessed me by surrounding me with people that are just truly better than me, right? In some capacity, I have such awesome friends and mentors and people around me. So I've just been really, really thankful for that. And so there's a John Maxwell quote out there that says, if you want to go somewhere fast, go alone. Mm-hmm. But if you want to go somewhere far, you better take some people with you. Yeah. And so that's just been something I've really tried to live my life by, is that nurturing and being super intentional about the relationships you have in your life, and understanding that you can't have 1,000 of them. But man, you can have 10, 12, 15, like people that you like intentionally breathe life into and like spend time with and nurture those relationships. Because if we're going to go somewhere far, and I think we all have been called to go somewhere much further than where society says you can go. Yeah. And so I think there's just a pull there. Anybody that's ever felt discontent when they wake up on a Monday morning, there's something else out there that's like pulling you, and like the Lord has a bigger plan. And so surrounding yourself with the right people is vitally important. And so I just think that community is one of those things. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I only have 2 emotions. I'm either happy or asleep, and that's it. And so, but I think that it's super important that like you find your joy. And like joy is not always mean that you're just happy because the circumstances are happy. Mm-hmm. Like joy is like when things are tough and none of your kids are sleeping and you haven't slept for the night for 6 months, like you can still find a way to be happy and engage with people. And I think that's important. I mean, in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 17, he talks about like you better always have a defense for your hope. And man, if you believe, what we believe the gospel to say is true, and then you mope around all day, like what hope is that, right? And so I think so community, take people with you to find your joy, and just really let people go out there. And so I think that's just been a really, really big thing. And then lastly, the one other piece that I'll say is just I think we, again, societally or culturally have kind of decided that we're going to put a big chasm, a divide between ministry and business. And that you've got your ministry that you can be involved in and you can do stuff with, and then you've got business, and those two things don't mesh. And that is something that I have a big problem with, that I don't think God has fragmented us to say that, okay, Caleb, between 6 and 8 in the morning, you're dad, then between 8 and 5, you're your business guy, and then between 5 and 7, you're ministry guy, and then 7 to bedtime, you're husband. Like it doesn't work like that. Like I'm all those things at all times. I am Christian first. I am businessman. I'm father. I am a husband. I am all those things. And I think I've seen, because my personal journey, I have been trying to get out of business for 10 years and go into ministry. And God just keeps saying, no, and hit me in the head and saying, buddy, your ministry's right here. Like, look at the number of people you have access to on a daily basis. And just do ministry there. And so I think that that's a big thing for people, is that I encourage them to look for the opportunities that are right in front of them, and to not feel like they have to separate their lives or segment them and do ministry between certain hours and business between others, because I think they're all the same.
Wow. That's awesome, man. Lots of thoughts there. What's probably get over to Ronnie here in just a minute with a question or two, because I know he's thinking over there. But yeah, man, I know you were talking about the last point of the divide. Tell me about that a little bit more. How is that created? Is that created within us, or do we see it just like that? I mean, was that something in the scriptures you just saw, like when he says, like, seek first the kingdom, everything I give you is a resource? And like, I know that's just been a journey for even like me in my life, because so I know that.
I think for me, so one of my favorite stories in the whole Bible is in Acts, when Aquila and Priscilla meet Paul, right? So Paul, visionary, missionary, like, guy goes out, and we're all probably Christians because of his initial journeys, right? And but largely that missionary trip was funded by Aquila and Priscilla, who were tent makers. And so Aquila and Priscilla had this thriving business in Rome. And then the emperor at the time got real uppity and decided he didn't want Jewish people to be in Rome. And so he exiled an entire people group. And so if you're Aquila and Priscilla and you're thinking like, okay, I got this business, Lord, what's happening? Like, why are you kicking me out of my business? Okay, I guess we'll go over here. And then suddenly you pop up a tent in Corinth and you meet this guy named Paul. And the rest of the world is different because of that moment. And so I imagine that, what if Paul had said, well, I'm now full-time ministry and I'm not going to have a vocation? He'd have never met Aquila and Priscilla. And what if Aquila and Priscilla said, well, we're not going to, like, Paul, you're a little too public with your views on Jesus, so we're it might be bad for business, so we're really not going to support you. I mean, what if that had happened, right? And you hear about some of the greatest ministries of even our time. Like, there's a guy named Ravi Zacharias, and Ravi's ministry was started by a businessman who walked up to him after a sermon and said, here's 50 grand. God's got something big for you. Let's go. You go do it. I'll fund it. And so I think that for too long, business has tried to keep itself out of ministry, that they don't kind of cross over. And I just don't think that's true. And the second piece is, and you and I talked about this a lot, man, ministry that relies solely on donors is hard to make sustainable for generations. Right? Like, it might be sustainable for a lifetime, but multiple lifetimes where you have to continuously rebuild the donor base, man, that's hard to do. But there are so many businesses that are self-sustaining, for-profit businesses that can turn their good or service, whatever they're doing, towards the ministry that they wanted to serve, and potentially even charge a fee for it, so that they can survive on their own, right? If they get donations, great, we'll get bigger, right? And there are certain business structures that allow you to do that. LC3 companies or limited profitability companies, where you can guarantee that you're only going to take so much profit and the rest of it goes back into the ministry portion of your business. I mean, there's tax structures that are available for that, and businesses aren't taking advantage of them. And so, when I see, companies that are able to sustain, I heard a story recently of a business that was raising capital. They were getting investors to come in, and they were a cutlery company. They made knives. And the owner of that company was a Christian, and he said, well, I've got to build this manufacturing facility. I'm going to do it in Nepal, and then I'm going to staff a missionary to run the plant. And so that was just an incredible moment where now this missionary is self-funded because they're paying him a salary, so he did not have to go out and raise money to get over there. And they're making a good or service which provides over 100 jobs to people in that community. And he just happens to hold Bible studies in the lobby every morning. And so I was like, man, that is the revolution of the church, is going to be through business. It's going to be through businessmen and women who say, I no longer accept just making a profit, but I've got to look at multiple bottom lines. And how is my business impacting the kingdom? How is my business impacting my employees? And is my business model sustainable for their well-being? And then, if we have income, where do we give that? How does that go? And where does the profit go? And so I think if we can get more businesses that are owned by Christians to act like Christian-owned businesses, then we've got a model that's going to sustain ministry for generations, and we never have to ask anybody for a dollar. And so I just think that's not that we shouldn't do that. Let me be clear, but I think giving people the chance to be involved in ministry through donations is huge. But I think there's also some sustainable ways that if we can bridge that gap between business and ministry, then things look a lot better.
Yeah, it is. The words that keep coming to my mind are intentionality. Is what we used it earlier, and it just seems to always come back to intentionality of asking the Lord what to do. Every resource is His. We say it all the time. Every resource, relationship, He puts His image on everyone, but He's like, here's the invitation into how intentional do you want to be? oh, I'll use every part of you. But do you actually want it?
Yeah.
And I think we then actually have to ask ourselves the question, do we really want that? And that's where that honesty and that conviction comes in.
Sure.
Because he's just like, the Lord's like, I give you, now what do you want to do with it?
Yeah.
It's an invitation. It's an invitation to be a part.
Well, I think that's the cool part too, is that, there's a book out there by Henry Blackaby called Experiencing God. And so it's got a whole kind of study with it. And he talks there about joining God where he is. Like if you don't have a vision, like if you're like, God, I've got these resources, I've got this talent, I got these skills, but like, I don't really know how to use them, then find somebody that's got the vision and figure out how those resources support them. Right. And so we don't have to make up something new. And there's a fine line between trying to do something for God and being obedient to God, right? Like God doesn't need you to do anything for him. He is God, right? But like he needs you to be obedient. And so, or he wants you to be obedient, right? Because there's blessings in obedience, right? There's so much that comes out of obedience. And so I think that's a big ask too, is like when you're looking at those and just saying like, all right, I don't know exactly what to do with this, but I'm going to start looking at my community and find somebody that's got the vision and see how I can support them.
Yeah. You got anything over there, Ronnie?
I got something. This is going to gear down or go kind of back in reverse.
Sure.
Father of two sons. Fatherhood is one of my things. Not good at it.
Yeah.
But it's something I strive to be better at. So now I heard what you said about your approaches to fatherhood, even having a fatherhood coach, right?
Yeah.
But what I want to ask goes a little deeper. What fuels your desire to want to be a great dad or be a better dad, if you can?
Yeah, that's a good thing. So I think I'll try not to get super emotional when I talk about this, but like my pops is like hands down best dad ever, right? And like he just exemplified so much. Like I remember, like I don't ever remember there being like a gospel presentation made in my house, right? Like my dad didn't sit me down and say, Caleb, this is what happened. Creation, fall, redemption, like none of that ever happened. But like I knew from like a super early age that like my dad paid a lot of attention to this guy named God, and it must be important. And so that drives a lot of, the way I'm able to view God now, because I know I've heard the stories and the testimonies about guys that didn't have good dads have a really hard time understanding like the character of God, like the goodness, the kindness, the love, the unconditional love that God provides us, because they never got that from an earthly father. And so, I am able to see some of just a mild glimpse of the way God's character might actually be, because my dad was the way he was. And so when I think about my son and my two daughters, and I say like, man, if they ever question like the character of God, it better not be because it was something I did, right? And so I just think that that's like a driving factor for me to say like man, if I have this charge to raise them up in a certain way, under certain parameters with certain rules, but at the end of the day, like they need to see God's grace and goodness and kindness and support and encouragement and all of those things through me. And to be clear, the reason I have a fatherhood coach is because I'm not really good at it, right? And I'm trying to say like, man, if I'm willing to invest in my business and willing to invest in all these other things, then I better be willing to invest in my family. And so I think that's kind of the behind the scenes, is just that when Charles gets up and at some point in the next 14 years, like homeboy's not going to have to ask me permission for anything. And I'm going to be like, and like Charles is a wild man. You guys know that. And so, but like, I just want to make sure that he has seen that unconditional love, the grace, the mercy, the sternness, like God still expects respect, right? So there's part of that, but I want him to be able to see that. I see that in my dad. And so I want to be able to carry that on.
Yeah. Good question, brother. Yeah, so just like wrapping it up, I just want to hit those one more time of, first was community. If you want to go somewhere fast, go alone. If you want to go somewhere far, go with someone. Better take people with you.
Yeah, better take somebody with you.
Number 2 was just giving a reason for the hope and what joy is when you walk around. And that's powerful, and it's definitely hard for me, especially in times that we are of always going back to that joy.
Well, yeah, and two, like I've seen that bumper sticker that says, you know, preach the gospel, use words if necessary, which I don't agree with, by the way. But if you were living that life and you say, well, I'm going to live my life a certain way, and people are going to see that I'm different, they're going to ask me why, and then that's my cue for gospel presentation. All right, well, if that's true, you better look different than everybody else. Because if you look just like everybody else, they're never going to ask you, right? Like if you're still sad on Mondays and you still live in a ton of debt and can't do anything because you're always trying to make ends meet, and you don't strive to better yourself, and you don't provide excellent service at work, and you don't look different than everybody else, then they're never going to ask you why you're different. And so I think you got to set those internal metrics to say, like, if I was truly working as if working for the Lord, would this be the way I acted? So and if the answer is no, then you got to change. Otherwise, nobody's ever going to ask you.
Yeah, so good, man. Yeah, and then just the third is just breaking down that dichotomy that we always try to create between business and ministry.
Yeah, business is mission. Yeah, in the story. Yeah,
and our lives are about the kingdom. Every minute, every resource is an invitation to be with God, and to receive what he has for us. And that's just powerful. And even as you were talking about your kids and your dad, I don't just try to evangelize my kids every night. You know, it is my life shows them the character of who God is,
right?
Of who is around me, where what we talk about, our joy together, and our dinner tables. Yeah. Like it's so beautiful. So
you get that, you know, that old saying that if you show me your calendar and your checkbook, I'll show you where your heart is. Like, I mean, your kids have this like just personal, like behind the curtains view of your life and the words you use to them and your wife. And so like, they're always going to see the real, like after the mask comes off, you walk in, take off your mask, and you sit down on the couch or whatever you do, like they get to see what's behind there. And man, the impact on that can be huge. So,
dude, so good, brother. Thank you
man.
For joining us this morning.
Pleasure.
I just hope and pray that this meets people, and that we would just be intentional.
Amen.
Yeah. Have a great day.
Thanks, man.